Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lyn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts. And today, listeners, we're going to be talking around a very, very interesting topic. Are you a chaser or a runner? And I've got a lovely expert that's literally been one of these in her lifetime. Her name is Juliana Linder. She's a somatic career mentor. So welcome, Juliana.
Oh, thank you so much, Lyn. It's a pleasure to be here and to share with others my story.
Well, go ahead, because I know that for you shared a little bit off there about what your story was. So for the benefit of the listeners, just explain, your link with the topic around, are you a chaser or a runner?
Yeah, I had this idea, and I know that this comes up in kids, especially the ones that don't like their home situation and want to bail. That I considered at some point, I was probably around 13 or 14, to pack my bags and leave and get away from the house. And so that really initiated me to run away, to start anew and have a different situation a different environment. And I started that process when I was 16, and I asked my father to gain custody of me because I was living with my mother and she had me in custody. And so at 16, I moved into my dad's house, and that was the beginning of a very repetitive cycle of ditching my problems, running away from conflict, and starting new. And I ended up between the age of 16 and 29, I moved 17 times.
Wow. So you're not just a runner, you're literally a repetitive runner.
Yes, yeah.
And you think that may have stemmed from your experience within your own family dynamic?
Yeah, and there's always layers and there's different sides of every story. But I recall, and I said this off air, I recall a conversation with my father just this year where we were getting into some serious topics, and for about 20 or 30 minutes sitting at the dining room table, and then it got to a point where it just felt like things were going around in circles, and he was staying very closed off, and I was asking, curious questions about what was happening and what's going on in his life too. And at some point it was like, okay, I'm done and it's time for bed. And he walked away and he said from afar, when relationships get hard, I bail. And in that moment, it just hit me like a tsunami wave that I had absorbed that tendency for myself in every single relationship that I had been through, up until a mark where I really landed in myself, and I wasn't running away from myself, because that's really what I found after 15 years of running, was that it wasn't just about the problem that I faced or the conflict or the destruction that was created. It was me running away from myself. And there was at some point, there's still nowhere else to hide. I got to a point in 2019 where I spent 9 days in jail, and then I went back again about a year and a half later. And when you're tied to a place in that way, that the cell walls are there, you cannot leave, you cannot run from this type of situation. That feeling of being backed up into a corner and only having two directions to follow. You have the direction of the same, I'm going to stay here, I'm going to stay the same, I'm going to be complacent, it's going to always be this way, or make something different of your life, do something different, be someone different. And so that really was my wake-up call to start to do things differently.
What was the thing that made you realize, I suppose, was it literally having that time and space to reflect in that moment, that you had been in an unhealthy pattern with your running?
It was a little of both. It was this unconscious symbolism that I wasn't fully aware of in the moment, But then even the conversations happening with other women in the facility, that I would hear them, because this is what I do best. I hear someone's words and I see and hear beyond the words. So I make a connection with where I make a personal connection, and then I make almost a universal connection. And so this one woman, the second time I was locked up, she was saying how she was always in, like, meant for, it was like she was saying, I'm always meant to suffer. Everything in my life has always led me to a place where I'm suffering. And I think that that's what my, path on this earth was meant to be and look like. And when I heard those words, I felt them so deeply, as in, this is how I've thought for so many years, half my life pretty much. And it was a declaration and a decision that I didn't want to accept that anymore.
Absolutely, because we can change things, can't we? We can't stay, or we can stay forever, I suppose, stuck if we choose that that's what we think we ought to be doing. But we do have that choice, don't we? We can either decide that we're going to be a victim of life, or empower ourselves and allow life to happen through us and not to us.
Yeah. The cage and constrained entrapment that I felt in my own mind and body was something there's another word for than determined, but I was very determined to liberate myself. And again, the symbolism of being in jail was a catalyst for me to start looking at myself, seeing myself, listening to myself, holding myself, loving myself. And the year that followed that was exactly what I was meant to lean into. And to start my own business was one of those declarations that not only can I do hard things, because I already had pushed my body physically to do hard things, and that was very much a compensation for what I wasn't willing to do or see within myself, and stretch myself in emotional capacity, emotional resiliency, and risk taking, walking through fears, all of those things. The declaration of opening my doors to business, having known pretty much nothing about business, I knew that I was going to take a rough road in the beginning, a bumpy road, but my determination and resilience was going to have me follow through continuously. No matter how hard it got, I would be there for myself.
And that's the most important thing, isn't it? Doing it for yourself, not for validation or, external approval from others.
Yeah. Well, that was that was something that I my attention was on when things got really tight and rough and constricted, and I felt like my energy was more coming from desperation than determination. I could start to see that and sit with it, and and look at the wound that I was starting to repair around seeking validation from my parents. And even though I was doing something that they did not believe was a good route for me, I was desperate for the success of my business in the beginning, to wave that flag and say, see, or wave that ticket, look, I made it, I can do it, and I can do it my own way. And that was almost the first 2 years of business, just sitting with that and starting to hear the stories that were compiled in me and packed really deeply of who was I doing this for? Why was I doing this? And that energy was it wasn't productive. It wasn't flowing. Didn't feel natural. It didn't feel genuine. So it brought a lot of restriction.
Yeah, because you're forcing something that isn't naturally flowing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's when we're in the energy of, without even realizing it, of like you say, desperation, which is around fear, worry, doubt, and distrust, and all of those sorts of types of negative energy, without realizing that we are, and we're coming across as desperate. And it's funny, because I was coaching somebody years and years ago, and she was doing the exact same process as what I was doing, but I was succeeding and she was not, and we were getting the same amount of leads, and I was converting, nearly 100% of mine, and she wasn't converting any. And she said, Lyn, what are you doing different to me? What is it? And I realized it was because she was coming from that place of desperation. She was so desperate to get a client that energy was repelling those potential customers and clients, whereas I wasn't. I was comfortable and secure, and coming from a place of abundance and love and faith and trust, and so it was a more productive energy that people were responding to.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's huge. And you pointed out in our conversation earlier that language that I heard from my father. You said something like it's something that men tend to do when things get hard, they bail. It's a more so masculine trait, and that's something that I really witnessed in all that drive and pursuit, especially coming from a background of a male dominated sport and very like the aggressor, the dominator, the powerlifting sport. I had a lot of masculine traits that were dominating my energy and personality. And I did what I have done in the past, and I find value in it for me personally. And I kind of tend to do it a little differently, and I learned differently from this type of approach, but I brought it to the opposite extreme. So I felt like I was in the extreme of the masculine tendencies trait, and I directed myself and surrendered to an extreme of the feminine.
Yes.
And I did that for a period of time to really allow myself to be in it fully, and then started to emerge out of it, to see how I could merge, literally come to center with both of them and have them equally contribute to my work and to my creativity and to my flow and to my energy and to all of it. But I attest to myself and my personal journey to the path of extremes, to this point. And now I find myself in a middle, which is I find very beautiful.
Yeah, and you know what? We don't get taught these things by our parents or through the school system, do we? And it's okay to be in masculine energy as a woman. We all embody both energies, and sometimes that energy does serve us because the masculine energy is the action taker. It is the doer, but it's equally important to sort of sit with our feminine energy at times, and the feminine energy is just being and just knowing and being in flow and following intuition.
Absolutely.
And, quite often if we've been hurt or suffered, especially at the hands of men in our past, we can quite often default into masculine energy just naturally, because we're trying to protect ourselves. And sometimes, as I say, masculine energy can be good, especially within our careers or vocation, but or in sports, if we need that competitiveness. But certainly when it comes to our intimate relationships, if you are in essence at your core the feminine in your relationship, then it doesn't serve to have you being or trying to be the masculine energy in your intimate relationship, because that means that he'll pick up on that masculine energy and you'll find it's like two stags butting heads. And that's why conflicts are happening within relationships, because the man in our lives is usually picking up on your masculine energy suddenly being present in the room, and he wants to wear the trousers, not you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I acquired a lot of that because that was modeled to me. My mother was the leader, more so the dominator, because a leader is a really good listener and a really good navigator of their team, of the environment that they're in. And so I switched that word to dominator because she wanted to rule over the house, and it was her way or nobody's other way. And that included her partner, my father. So that caused a lot of battles, a lot of friction in the relationship. And I know that she acquired that from her mother. My grandmother was the same way. And that was brought into a lot of my relationships and created a lot of friction, to the point where, there was so much friction, it ended up being like combustible, really. And that's what had me running and fleeing from some relationships when I was in my early to mid 20s. And yeah, so my avenue of taking myself to the extreme of feeling into all these feminine flow, intuition, sitting still, allowing, trusting, surrendering, all of that has absolutely made me a better partner.
Absolutely. 100% agree. And I also know that, if you are somebody that doesn't sit strongly in your feminine, in other words, you're more in the middle ground of, neither strongly masculine or feminine in your intimate relationships. Sometimes, but probably being probably a little bit more in your masculine, but not strongly. What you'll find is that your man in your life will either challenge that and there'll be conflict, or he'll step more into feminine energy and you'll just have a friendship type relationship where there's no passion. It's just, okay, and settling for, it's okay.
Yeah. A settling for, that's a great way to describe that. When you feel like things are okay, but it could be better, and they have been better.
Absolutely, because if you want passion in a relationship, there has to be that strong polarization of energies. It doesn't matter which gender you are, but there has to be that polarization of energies. Somebody in the relationship has to strongly embody the feminine, and the other one has to strongly embody the masculine, and that's what creates the actual passion in a relationship. And that can be unhealthy, if you're in unhealthy masculine or feminine energy, or it can be healthy if you're in healthy masculine or feminine energy. And obviously, what we're trying to do is educate people how to sit more in their healthy, whatever their natural core energy is.
Yeah, and the intricacies in that, like just as you're describing it and the whole conversation that we had, there's so many elements and aspects to noticing where you are, noticing where your energy is. And I find myself always attuning to the body, as a body worker. Who was trained in the background with exercise science and all my physiology and biomechanics classes, and learning about levers and angles and joints, but like all of these things, how they how they perform, how they can be compromised for injury or imbalance. Those same processes and approaches and programs really are things that I've inquired and really dug into deeper in my inner world practice. And I can see the similarities and the complexities in them. And so that's why it's always great to have a mentor, a coach, either or, whatever stage you're in, because it's the fine tuning, the 1 to 2% that usually really makes a bigger difference than we can even see. Once you cross that bridge of being, beginner to intermediate, where you're starting, you've already listened to yourself, you started to unravel stories, and you're focusing on your energy and you're tuning in with yourself. That's when the next stage comes in, and the layers that have been still, sometimes our mind creates masks when we're trying to take off our masks, I guess is the best way I could describe it. So there's like hidden spots, and then an expert who's really great at listening to these little spots, little blind spots, little cracks, is going to be able to ask the questions that get to, okay, are you in an unhealthy feminine? Like, you're in feminine, you're in feminine, but are you in unhealthy feminine? And we can see that from the observer perspective, which is, I think, a fun part of the work that we do. I could say we, because
yes,
I can tell that you do the similar work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said about even just making 1 or 2% change is huge, because when you think about it, if a pilot is flying an airplane, and even if he just goes 1 degree off course, he'll end up in a different location completely, won't he? So just don't think that just making a minor change or taking that first step is not going to make much difference, because it does.
Yeah. I heard recently this example of, let's call it an engineer mechanic, who comes to a nuclear power plant, and the power plant is not functioning, it's not running, and they don't know why. So they call an expert to come in to resolve the situation. And this expert comes in and spends about 5 hours investigating, and comes down to this bolt that either was missing or needed to be tightened or replaced, something like that. So he replaces the bolt, screws it in tight, and the entire plant, the entire machine starts functioning again. It's repaired, and sends the power plant a bill for his service, and it's $50,000. And they're outraged. They're like, "What are you talking about? That was one bolt. Why? How can you charge $50,000?" He said, "Well, the bolt is $1, and my expertise to find that one tiny 3-centimeter bolt is worth $49,990."
Yeah, I've heard a similar story, but yes, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good way to explain it. So for our listeners' benefit, Juliana, what's your best way for them to get connected to you?
I'm on Facebook a lot, and it's the easiest way to have an open conversation. I'm a very open person. My highest value is honesty and transparency, and I share a lot on Facebook. So it's the easiest way to start a conversation with me, and that's how I enjoy it that way. It's very natural.
Great stuff. So any final words of wisdom around the topic of are you a chaser or are you a runner that you'd like to share with our audience?
This has come up many times before, and I stand by it as being such a powerful mover in the direction of healthier behaviors. Running and chasing are not healthy behaviors. So self-forgiveness is on the forefront of mending that part of you that was committed to an unhealthy behavior of running. So every time that I ran, every time that I fall back on my commitments, just like in despair and resented myself for how I handled things, I needed to offer myself forgiveness.
Love that. And it's a huge part of being that first step, isn't it? Just looking at that as an example.
Yeah, it takes your awareness into acceptance. And I came to this about 2 years ago, this idea that self-awareness without self-acceptance continues to lead the cycle of self-suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. And they say that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional, because we don't need to keep wallowing in that pain forevermore, do we?
No, unless we're chasing it.
Yeah, I love that. So to wrap things up, Julia, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story. It's been a fascinating conversation, and thank you very much for being part of this episode.
Oh, this was great, Lyn. Thank you so much.
So it just leaves me to say that true love starts with opening our heart. And until next time, goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lyn via the Facebook group 2 Hearts Entwined, or search Lyn Smith, inspirational speaker, at LinkedIn, or email lyn@hearts-entwined.com. That's LYN@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.